What's up, CF students? We are in week 2 of our series POV. And in this series, we're discussing some fresh perspectives on stories that we all know, but through their perspective, through the perspective of the people in the Bible, and maybe some people that we may not know are even in the Bible. This week, we're going to walk through a story in the Bible that may be short, but it's powerful. It's filled with plot twists, and this story is found in the book of Ruth, and it's a story about faithfulness, about loyalty and redemption. So let's start by setting the stage. The story starts off with this woman named Naomi, and her family, which consists of her husband and her 2 sons, they moved from Bethlehem to this place called Moab. And because there was a famine in the land, while they were living in Moab, actually Naomi's husband Elimelech dies. Say that name 3 times fast. Elimelech, Elimelech, Elimelech. Dang, that was good. Pat myself on the back for that one. So she's left with her 2 sons in the land that is foreign to her. And her sons they actually ended up getting married to this girl named Orpah and then another woman named Ruth. And they were married to their wives for 10 years. But then 10 years later, her 2 sons pass away. So now Naomi is in a land, no husband and no sons. She's in a foreign land. She has nothing. This is bad, and particularly, this is devastating in that time because now Naomi had no way to make money. All of her money was dependent on her husbands or her sons to bring that in. So Orpah and Ruth, they have no husbands, they're alone, they're in a hopeless situation, and Naomi comes to them and she's like, hey, I'm going back to Bethlehem. I gotta go back to where my people are. She tells her daughter-in-laws to just go be with their families and to return to their customs in Moab. And Orpah's like, all right, bet, deuces. But Ruth is different. She has a different response. And that's why we're looking at this story through the lens of Ruth. And this is what it says. This is how Ruth responds to Naomi. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I go. And where you stay, I stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die. And there we will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped her urging. So the 2 women went until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in the town of Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred, and they were excited. They said, can this be Naomi? And Naomi's response is, don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. Ruth 1, verses 16 through 21. That is a tough passage of scripture. Naomi is going through it, guys. But I truly believe this, that we can get a better POV, a better perspective on the story of Naomi and Ruth by understanding a couple details. The first one is this, Naomi's label. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to a new place where, they have those My Name Is tags, right? And you put your name on it. Well, the purpose of those name tags is so that people who you have never met can identify you. The cool thing about those name tags is you can write anything you want on there. Sometimes, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I go to the places and I put different names just to see if people actually think I look like a Robert. I don't think I look like a Robert. My name's Devontae, but I try it sometimes because it's kind of cool. Well, sometimes in our lives, we can take on labels based on our circumstances. And that's actually what Naomi does in verses 19 through 21. It says this, so the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, can this be Naomi? Naomi's response, don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? Naomi, the Lord has afflicted me. The Lord Almighty has brought misfortune on my life. Unfortunately, too often we give or take labels out of the grief that we experience in our different and difficult situations. To her town, Naomi's arrival was what her name meant, pleasant. But the loss of her husband, the loss of her sons, it led her to take on a different word. That name Mara actually means bitter. Guys, we can't let the loss or the hurt that we experience in our life create labels that we were never meant to wear. Her name was Naomi. Her life was pleasant. Her arrival was pleasant, and her circumstances caused her to call herself something that God had never given her. So for us to get a better POV of this story, we have to first understand that we need to know that Naomi's label was not the one that God gave her. The second thing that we can learn from this story is Ruth's loyalty. And Ruth was loyal. It says this in the book of Ruth. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law, Orpah, is doing the right thing. She's going back to her people and to her gods. Go with her." And that's when Ruth replies, "Don't urge me to leave you. Don't tell me to go back. Where you go, I go. Where you stay, I stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. Ruth 1:16-18. One thing that we have to understand about this story, Ruth was a Moabite, right? She was a Moabite woman, and Naomi was an Israelite. These two groups of people historically did not get along. It was common practice, actually, for these two groups to stay far away from each other because of the long history of conflict that they have. But what's so interesting is that Ruth's loyalty doesn't care about what history has said about these two people. It shows her willingness to stay with Naomi, her obedience to walk away from the fake loyalty that would say, hey, because you're this and because you're that, I can't stay with you. Because staying in Moab would have been easier for Ruth, but she decides to stick with Naomi because staying loyal to her is better than going back to comfortable circumstances. Ruth's loyalty and commitment teaches us what true commitment looks like. Oftentimes we run from God, or we run from people because things get tough. Or when it feels like there's nothing that God has left for us, we run away. We run back to what was comfortable instead of staying loyal to the plan that He has for us, loyal to the people that He's placed in our life. Instead of running when times are hard, we can learn from Ruth to cling to the promises and the relationships that God offers us. Ruth's loyalty is what opened the door for her future blessing. So don't miss this. We have to drop the fake labels that circumstances give us. We have to understand that loyalty is always going to be better than comfort. And the third thing is this: we can learn more from this story by understanding Boaz's love. Now we're introducing a new character. His name is Boaz. Boaz shows up and he shows us this type of love that God actually calls us to have with people. We're first introduced to him when Ruth goes to pick grain that has fallen from his field when her and Naomi go back to Bethlehem. This is what it says. At this time, she bowed with her face to the ground, and she asked Boaz, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes, that you would notice me, a foreigner?" Boaz replied, "I've been told about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and your mother and your homeland, and you came to live with people you did not know. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Ruth 2:10-12. Boaz heard of Ruth's loyalty. And instead of being like, "Oh, you're a Moabite, stay away from me," he actually offers her a blessing. He offers her care. He continues to allow her to pull grain from his field with the other women. His love continues on in chapter 4. It says this: "Then Boaz told him, 'Of course, your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family.' Then the family redeemer said, 'I can't redeem it.' And so Boaz says, the landowner says, 'Because this might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land, I cannot do it.'" So maybe you're asking yourself, what the heck is going on in this story? Well, what happened during this time is you had these people called family redeemers. And what that meant is if there was ever a loss, something happened to a husband or the men in a family, there would be these other people in the family that could come and redeem that family, could make sure that Naomi was provided for, that Ruth was provided for. Well, Boaz wasn't the first family redeemer, but because Boaz loved Ruth so much, because he saw her loyalty, because he knew that she was dedicated not only to Naomi, but to living a life that God called her to live, one that was away from labels, one that was committed to loyalty, it caused a righteous love. This is the kind of love that God calls us to have with all of his people, a kind of love that will lead people into a relationship with him and the purposes that he has for their life. Not only because God wants us to live like this to help grow his kingdom, but he wants to use us for his greater plan. Boaz's love led him to be a part of God's greatest plan. Jesus, the son that Ruth and Boaz would eventually have, would become the grandfather of David. And from David's line comes Jesus. It says this in Ruth chapter 4, verses 21 to 22. Boaz, the father of Obed. Obed, the father of Jesse. And Jesse, the father of David. When we love well, when we choose loyalty, when we remove the negative labels that circumstances or people give us, we create the opportunity to fulfill the purpose that God has for us. Students, that's our heart for you. That you would fulfill the purpose that God has for your life, on your life, and for the people that he has surrounded you with. We love you so much. We can't wait to see you next week.